Welcome back to Qtronics, where I have all the gear and no idea. Recently I modded a Switch Lite, and today we're here with the Switch OLED. So if you want to check out the previous video, I'll drop it in the description or up here somewhere for you to go and check that out. I'm not doing this for piracy, I'm doing this purely because I want a NAND backup in case something fails, and I want to run this at the full speed Nvidia intended the APU to run at. That's my primary goal. Now, obviously we're going to be installing a PicoFly, which is a mod chip based on the Raspberry Pi. Now, the Switch Lite is relatively easy. It's nice and quick, nice and simple. The OLED for me personally is so much more difficult. Firstly, we've got to get this little chip, this little PCB flex cable or whatever you want to call it, to sit underneath the eMMC to get a reading on the DAT0, and then we have to cut away some of the heat shield for the APU and scratch away some of the solder mask just to get to one of the points. So all in all, this one is a little bit more challenging. We have to run a few wires. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. I'm not going to bore you with me taking apart this OLED. The next time you'll see me, we'll be down to the motherboard. Catch you soon. Right then guys, we're back with the board out of the Switch now. So let's get started. As I mentioned before, this one is a lot more involved. We've got 3 separate pieces here we need to solder rather than 2. And we're going to actually have the clippers out to clip some of the board away. So yeah, let's get into it. Firstly, over to the mic, and we're going to get rid of that heat shield. Because if you've watched my previous video, it took a lot longer last time to get that shield open than I wanted it to. So let's start with getting that heat shield sorted and we'll go from there. Right, I'm going to try and get this heat shield off. Right, I'm going to see if my smaller pliers can do it or not. I think they can. So I bought a fancy set of pliers. That cost me like £8 sorry, tweezers. They cost me like £8 for one set. So I'm hoping these will work to get this open with. Remember, when you're taking these off, there's a little bit of solder paste, thermal paste under them, so if they stick a little bit, it's just that. Don't put too much force into them. Right then, we're off. So I'm just going to give this thermal paste a bit of a clean off. Again, it's another one of these switches where there's not a lot of thermal paste on this. I'm a bit surprised. Now, obviously Nintendo will put as little on as possible to save money. A few pennies on each one that's sold actually add up quite a lot for Nintendo, but for us they don't. So we'll be putting the proper amount back on. So we want to get all this thermal paste off, but we don't want to be too aggressive on it. Now, I'm actually not going to start with soldering this part here like I did with the Switch Lite. It's not worth it. But with this board, we actually need to solder on to the underneath the eMMC chip. So let's pop that off. Now this one pops off quite easy. It's not on any special clips. It literally just pops off. Nice and easy. Keep it though, because we need this put back on in a minute. Right. Now, this part basically is our C point on the Nintendo Switch Lite, if you've seen it. Basically, this little thing here needs to slide and sit under the eMMC like this just to get a connection onto it. So we're actually going to have to cut away some of the heat shield. So the part we need to cut away is, just to start with, I would cut away from this bit here and leave the rest in place. If we can't get it in then, we can cut away the whole section. But let's start with that part and we'll go from there. As you can see, we've tripped that down now. Right, back over to the scope. So this bit here is different in every single mod chip that you get. They're always a little bit different. This one has such small ground points here. I'm actually surprised. So hopefully we're hoping that we can tuck this under here and then get the ground points to hold here. And if we can't, we'll have to remove the rest of this heat shield. And I'll just get you an example of what I mean with a different one. This one, for example, has thicker end ground points. So we'll see if this one works first, as it has additional points on the side here that you can mount if you need to. So the way we know if it's in place is we get the multimeter out in diode mode. So black on ground and then red on the D point, and then we should be seeing around 0.4 to 0.8. Would help if I was in diode mode. There we go. That looks like to me that's worked. That's 0.64. So I think that should be on. Just going to give that another little push and double check, but that should be fine then. Basically, it's making contact with the ball underneath, so it won't really ever sit perfect, which is why there's extra ground mounting points. Let's see if that comes up again. That looks right to me. Great, let's get that soldered in then. You want to keep as much pressure on this as possible. See how that moved? Immediately.
Two sides. Two sides?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think we're going to have to remove the rest of that shield. So let's just get that removed and we'll go from there. Right, I'm just going to change my soldering iron tip, and then I'm going to actually. So I'm just going to solder the 1 point on. Yeah, I know. I think you don't have to, but if you want that stronger connection, it's definitely worth doing. Let's just double check those points before we carry on, as this D point can move back and forward when you're soldering it, so I just want to double check we are definitely getting the right value. The next part is we're going to have to cut from here to the clip here, as the D point is about there underneath here. So we need to clip this away. So let's get that sorted. And if you clip all the way, you don't have to clip quite that far, but if you clip all the way to the clip, when we put the wire under the wire, we don't have to bend as much on the wire. So yeah, let's do that. Right. Before we do any soldering, I'm going to show you how my ribbon sits on here. And I'm going to put a bit of solder mask on here anyway. I'm probably going to put a bit of solder mask on that point there where I touch the board. I'm not happy that it's very close to the D point. So the ground point is right next to D, which I'm not happy about how that sits. The ribbon's not cut the best, unfortunately. Your ribbons, if you get a ribbon one, it might be cut fine. Just mine isn't, so I'm not happy with that. You see that D point touches that ground point there? I'm not happy with that. So let's get some solder mask out and we'll solder mask that off a little bit. Right then guys, back. I believe the solder mask is dry now. I'm just going to give it a quick check using the needle. Hopefully it has dried. Look. Right, so the next part we need to do is scratch off this little wire here. I'm going to just scratch off this point here. It's coming under the CPU, so don't mess this part up. I'm using a needle because you can feel when you've got to it. That should hopefully be enough removed for us to get a nice little solder blob on there. Let's give it a go. Right, I think we've just about done that now. It's a very tiny point, it's really hard to get anything on it. Double check that ground and D point's not together. In continuity mode. Not good. Put a little bit more solder mask on there because I'm unhappy with how it is. Right then, let's solder that ribbon on. Right, I just want to test that D. I want to test that D point first before we carry on. Again, in dial mode, should be similar to the readings we got for the C point on the back. Eight volts. That looks good. Yep. And let's just double check we're not bridged. And this ground point does work, and this doesn't, and this part here we'll check that again in diode mode. Eight volts, that looks good. Well, 0.8 volts, that's not the correct reading. It's just a ground point here. This bottom bit next to A, we'll do it anyway because there is something coming off it. And then we have 3.3 volt line. Don't worry about bridging these, they're paired. Right, let's test that B point. Well, sorry, not the B point. The B point won't be there. Let's double check A. Make sure we've got A and D still. .7. We'll check D again. 0.8. Ground, and we'll just double check. We're getting something from the 3.3 volt. In 0.8 on the back here. Obviously that'll go to 3.3 when the console's turned on. Right then, I'm happy with that. Just going to give that a quick clean up with some IPA, and we'll get onto the final part of the soldering. I need to change my soldering iron tip first, as we need to get those ground points good and proper. And as this is connected to the heat shield, this can soak away a lot of the heat. So we need to make sure we're getting a good connection. It nice and secure. Right, I'll swap back to the other tip now for the actual soldering. Right, let's check that in diode mode and see if we've got a good connection there. And what, 0.2, yeah, that's my leads. This should be anywhere between 10 and 15. That's probably not soldered on properly then. Oh no, 10.8, there we go. And then this side should also be 10.8, 0.9, and this side should be 0. Yep. .11. And 0.3. Yep, that looks good. Right then, we're done with all the soldering now, and we can put it back enough just to test. So give me a few minutes and we'll get to that point. No, we're not done with all the soldering. I have lied. We need to solder on the 2 wires now. Sorry, that's my mistake. I completely forgot. Normally we'd be done. So the D point we made here earlier on needs a wire soldering to it. So I've got some 30 gauge wire here. We'll just double check that in diode mode. The 10th millionth time now. Yep, 6.36, perfect. And the final bit of soldering for now is back on the back of the board. Double checking that is the right place. Yep, next to the arrow. It looks like there's already some solder on there. So we'll gonna put a bit of flux on and just make sure that's some fresh solder. There we go. That's the beat. That's the reset point. We can just run that wire through this hole here. Oops, you got him. Right then, that's all the soldering now for the next little bit. So let's get back onto the main part of the board. Right then, now it's just the reassembly. So eMMC shield. Bend up the cuts in there so it doesn't cut the wire. And then the CPU heat shield. So let's get some thermal paste. Let's actually make sure it's got some decent thermal paste on there. I'm just going to clean this up where we've obviously had flux on it. Flux is non-conductive, but it's nicer to clean it up if we can. The perfect jizzle of thermal paste, and that's what I'm calling it, and that's what I'm sticking with, jizzle.
Again? Seriously?
Right, bend the heat shield in the place where the ribbon is. Heat shield on. Need some Captain tape to go underneath the board before we stick it on. I just need some double-sided sticky to stick the thing down. And to apply the sticky to the back of the board first. And then you can put the ribbons in place and then solder it down. And then stick it down even. Right, so we connect the ribbons. Captain tape just needs moving over ever so slightly. The board down, and then final point we need to solder is just to this B here. So I'm just going to do that on the camera so we can see. Get that back under the scope. Actually, just so you guys can see properly, and I can see properly. We're just soldering onto that little B point there. A bit of flux. There we go, B point soldered. Just check we've actually got anything there in diode mode. just before we put the soldering iron away. .54, that seems right. Perfect. Right, I'll be back with you shortly when I've got the board in enough to test. So catch you in a minute. Right then guys, it's all now fully reassembled. It took a bit of time to get back together, they always do. I like to really take my time putting it back together, make sure the right thermal paste is on there, make sure all the antennas are wired properly, sticking them down. I like to do a good job when I do something. So let's make sure it's all still working and it boots to Atmosphere. I have installed my SD card that has my Atmosphere boot, so let's see what happens. There we go, volume button's pressed, and there we go, straight into Henteke. Say that again, straight into Hecate even. There you go, it's all booting, nice and working, and that's it. Obviously this memory card's been used in another Switch, so I can't use it in this one, but just to show you that it boots to there, and yeah, all good, and we'll power that off now. Right guys, if you've stayed with us to the end of this video, thank you very much. I know this one takes quite a long time, and for me personally, this is the hardest modification I've done to date. It's really tedious, especially getting the thing slid under the eMMC. I believe you can actually just take the eMMC off and solder onto the ball directly. It's something that I want to try in the future, so hopefully we can get there, and I think that'll be quite good. Anyway guys, let me know in the comments your thoughts on the mod. Let me know how I could improve and make this better. That would really help me, to be honest. And finally, if there's anything else you want to see modded, let me know and I'll see if I can do a video for it. Right, catch you next time. Bye.